So Andrew Mitchell has said that the evacuation process from Sudan is going smoothly. Do you think it is?
Well, I sincerely hope that it is. We've got this 72-hour window at the moment with the ceasefire. We really have to have as a priority evacuating British nationals. I understand now that an evacuation centre has been set up. We have to do everything now that we possibly can to make sure that all those British nationals come home and we make that process as easy for them as possible. But then, more widely, we also have to continue to push through diplomatic channels to try to find an end to this dreadful conflict.
Do you think the government should open up more routes for people to claim asylum from countries like Sudan?
Well, I think, first of all, with Sudan, we've got to work internationally to look at neighbouring countries, because clearly what we want to see is a situation where the conflict is brought to a conclusion and people can return to their homes. And I think that has to be the priority first of all. Clearly, there will be, as well, Sudanese people here in the United Kingdom, and the government has to look at the situation. There may well be ongoing visa applications, for example, in terms of family members, and the government really does need to be looking at that as well. But the real priority has to be internationally at this time.
Obviously, we'd love to see a diplomatic solution in Sudan, right? I think that goes without saying. But, you know, realistically, how much of a role can the UK actually play in that? Well, we can actually do something is take asylum seekers. Should we be doing that?
Well, firstly, the UK still has quite remarkable diplomatic clout around the world, and that is something that I've seen at first hand.
But the question is, should we be taking more asylum seekers from Sudan?
Well, in terms of that, just to take that, firstly, I think it has to be internationally, first of all, that we do this. It has to be an international solution where, of course, we should be playing a part in that. There is a wider question, too, about resettlement schemes. We've run resettlement schemes previously as to how they're working. And of course, we can look at that. But the priority at the moment has to be internationally.
OK. Obviously, the Sudan situation is happening at a time when you have also been voting on the illegal migration bill. And it does feel like these two issues overlap. We're talking about people in need from overseas. Should we be taking in more asylum seekers?
Well, I think we need to, first of all, deal with the issue that we've got of thousands of people who are risking their lives in small boats in the English Channel. Now, I've been down to Dover, I've been in the past across to France and seen at first hand how dangerous those sea lanes are. Now, to deal with this situation, we need to do, in my view, a number of things. We shouldn't be spending the money that's being spent on the Rwanda scheme, which is just a headline-grabbing scheme. We should be using that money to set up a specific cell in the National Crime Agency to try to deal with people trafficking. Secondly, we need to deal with the asylum backlog. The asylum backlog is in the region of about 138,000. The government just isn't dealing with it. I mean, I've just voted in the House of Commons for fast-track procedures in specific cases, and the government has just voted it down. The asylum system's in chaos. And thirdly, we then need much better return agreements. The government hasn't negotiated a successor scheme to what was called the Dublin III regulation. The Dublin III regulation both allowed us to return people whose claims had failed to other safe countries and also did include a safe route. That's what the government now needs to do.
So I've been listening really carefully to what you've been saying, and it really does strike me that Labour talk a lot about attacking the government when it comes to competence, so getting rid of the backlog of claims, which, don't get me wrong, I can see why that's something that people feel they should be doing. It's hard to disagree with that. But I guess what I'm trying to get to is what Labour under Keir Starmer believes when it comes to asylum seekers. Do you believe that the UK should be taking more asylum seekers?
Well, it will vary, won't it, year on year. And what happens here is people who come here and seek asylum, what they actually should have is a process that works very quickly for it to be decided whether they've got a valid claim. And that is a matter for the courts. I can't sit here, neither can any other politician, and tell you in a particular year how many asylum seekers have valid claims and who don't. That is a matter for the courts.
Sure, of course. I would never ask you to say which particular people have valid claims or not, but I just think that there is an overall question about what Labour believes when it comes to asylum seekers. Do you think that we're taking enough asylum seekers? And I do think that some politicians would be able to give you an answer to that.
Well, the number that we'd take will depend upon the number of valid claims that there are each year, and that is a matter for the courts. And in terms of... And let me just answer too, because at the moment we have a situation... Back in the early years of this government, in March 2011, the asylum backlog was probably just under about 6,000. It's now 138,000. Should we be processing those claims far more quickly so that we can see those that have a genuine claim, who've always had a safe haven here, and those who do not have a valid claim that need to be returned to safe countries? Absolutely we should be. That's what I've been trying to vote for in the House of Commons. That's where the government's been failing.
Andrew Mitchell said that the legislation today is, in his words, pushing the limits of international law. Is it breaking international law? Well,
the Home Secretary, in placing a certificate, the so-called Section 19 certificate, under the Human Rights Act on the bill, wasn't able to give a full assurance that it followed international. And that is and let me just say that is a profound error from this government, because I aspire to negotiate trade deals around the world, and that is important for our prosperity. And to do that, we have to be a country whose word is believed, that when we sign on the dotted line for our international obligations, we are a country that is going to stand by that in the years ahead. And this breaking international law, we've heard it before, of course, when the then Northern Ireland Secretary talks about breaking international law in a limited and specific way. That damages our standing on the international stage and ultimately will damage our prosperity as well.
So just finally, if Labour was in power, would you overturn this legislation?
We will pass legislation that gives effect to the principles that I set out in the interview a moment or two ago, Sophie, so that we can actually have an immigration system that is fair. That's what we will do.
OK, thank you.
Thank you.